What's up? So today I'm gonna do a third day on yesterday's weather, a third and final day. I was gonna do two, but I realized there's enough. There are enough cool things I can show off, and it'll be like kind of a perfect last hour. So I'll just kind of wrap it up today, and then Friday I'm gonna do probably a Bildr demo, but maybe got some other ideas cooking. So anyway, yeah, to finish this off, on the screen here is where we left it in the studio. And in the live view, it looks like this. But I realized that, so originally on Monday, I said maybe I would publish it today, but I realized it's not ready to publish. Like it looks very rough still. It's kind of unfinished. So I took my test run version and just kind of like styled it up a little bit. And importantly, added responsive into it. So now like this search bar and these columns will react. So stacked into two, and then when you get phone size, these things stack. And so there's more I can do, and I'm going to show how to get to from where we are to here today, including a custom Google font, which I might change, but that's just the one I chose. Responsive, and I'm going to do some UI stuff on this search bar. So to start off, I'm going to start by doing the simplest thing first, which is by default, when I load this page, it just says weather sentence there, which is wrong. It should say something like type your location above to search. So that's pretty easy. Just changing that default. I'd already changed it. I need to update. And so it starts with that. And then as soon as you type a location, it'll say finding your weather. So that's one thing. And then the next thing, just going down the page a little bit, I'm going to add some UI to this search bar. So one thing is when you first come to this page, this button's disabled. You can't click it to search. But then when you type, it enables. And if it's blank, it's going to disable again. That's pretty minor, but it helps people with knowing what to do. And it also helps people not double submit, which in this case is not a big deal. But it's a simple setup in Bildr. It's a few actions, but it's kind of cool to see. So the first thing I'll do is I'll come into this page and I need to create a condition like an action group over here that's going to run anytime I want to validate and either disable or enable the button. So I'll start with an action and I'll call it validate search input, because it's kind of validating, not really, but I'm validating that it's not blank and doing something. And this action will be a condition action in Bildr. So that is, you search for condition and you do this condition compare values. There's a few different kinds, but this is the main one you'll probably use. And it's a simple comparison statement where you compare test value 1, use some kind of operator, like if it equals or if it doesn't equal or if it's greater than or less than test value 2. And when you actually fill this stuff out, you get these extra options. So it's, in this case, and what I just typed test in there, it says if test equals blank, do one action if it's true and do another action if it's false. And so I didn't create these actions. You select them here. I'm going to go create them now. But basically, I'm going to say, I'm going to take this test value 1 from the element value of this input. So I say current page and I select this type of location input. I'm going to say if this value equals blank, do one thing, which is disable the button, or if it's not blank, do another thing, which is enable the button. And then I can run this action from anywhere. So let me create those result actions. So I'll create one called disable search button and one called enable search button. And these actions are pretty simple because Bildr has a built-in action for this, but you could do whatever you want in here, obviously, to you know, if you had more to do. In this case, if I want to enable or disable a button, I can actually just go for disable. I just add the action disable element disable. Choose it, choose the button that I want to disable, which is that search button. And then enable, there's an action called enable. And that's the search button. And so what these actions will do behind the scenes, you don't really need to know this, but they add the disabled attribute or they remove that attribute. So from like an HTML code standpoint, the browser knows that the button's disabled. The user is going to know visually. And if the user is using like a screen reader or other things, like it's going to be officially real disabled. So it's nice to use those built-in actions. The other way I would have done it is I would have done like set element attribute and actually manually change that attribute. But doing it that way, as opposed to what I could have done alternatively is remove the action on that button and like change the styling to make it semi-opaque or something. But this is a better way that's going to actually real time disable it. So that's that. So now I can go back to this validate search input and finish this out. I can say if the current page type of location input is blank, then disable the search button. And if it's not blank, enable the search button. And so that's that, and that's done now, except I need to call it from somewhere. So that's where I want it to check for this every time I type in this search field. So if I come in here and go to events, I have all these events, and I already have one from last time set for when you press the key enter, when you're in the input, it will submit, it will search. But I'm going to add more events, a couple other events for this validate. So I'm going to say if it ever changes, validate it, which is like if you change the value in there and then click out, that's when a change event will fire. And I'm going to say on key down, if you press any key, I want to validate that search input. And then the last place I would put that is right when the page loads. I want to check for that, which is going to set it to disabled usually because it starts blank. But rather than, manually start a blank, I'm just going to call on the page binding, which loads, first. When a page loads first, page load runs, which calls, you can do one-time stuff in here, which calls page binding. So after data page binding, I'm just going to nest this validate search input in here. And I'll wait for it just in case. But that should start it off correctly. And so if I click over to my live view and refresh, you can see that it started off semi-transparent, which I didn't change that. That's coming from the disabled attribute that's on it. I can see that, and when I click on it, it doesn't work, which I can't exactly tell, but I know that. And then when I type in this input here, it comes back up, it works. And if I remove it, it's disabled again. So that's exactly how I want it. That's perfect. The last step there is, if you notice, I have the hand cursor here on the button, even though it's disabled. That's because I had originally changed the button class to use this cursor pointer, this CSS cursor pointer. By default in HTML, a button doesn't get that little hand like a link does. A button gets like an arrow. But I wanted my button to be more like a link. I wanted that visual feedback for the user, so I had changed it. So if I come to this search button, I can show you right here, there's a button class. And on it, one of the properties I have set is cursor pointer. So that means even when it's disabled, it's going to get this little hand cursor. Pointer is this little hand that you see here. So what I need to do is I basically just need to change that, but only when the button's disabled. And I can do that with a CSS state. So up here, if you notice, there's devices for media queries for responsive design. I'm going to cover that in a minute. And then there's state, which is different. It's a CSS term, but it's different states of an element. So hover is one. So this input, when I hover the mouse over it, I could like change the background color, for instance. Disabled is one that's up here. Or you can click more. Let me get that menu off. You can click more and add any state or pseudo state you want. So in CSS, there's actually a lot of different things. There's like, you can target just the last child. You can target, you can add before and after elements. There's a lot you can do. That would be under this more tab. But it's a little bit of advanced CSS. Like it's not a necessary thing to know, but it is helpful sometimes. In this case, all I want to do is I want to affect that disabled state. So I can click this disabled here that already exists and just add the property that I need, which would be cursor. And I can just, to reset it, I can set it back to auto. And so now when it's disabled, it'll be cursor auto, but default, it'll be cursor pointer. So if I check that, see, that's doesn't look like I can click that button now, you know? But if I had a location in there, it does look like I can click that button. So I think that's good on as far as that goes. I already did the press enter to send last time, but that's another important UX detail. Like if you think about what a person would actually do using this, they're definitely going to type Texas and press enter. But I already had that done. So in my opinion, this top section UI wise is pretty, ooh, that's weird, is pretty good. That's strange. I think I did that once last time too, but I didn't see it in between. So anyway, yeah, I can move on a little bit. And UI wise, let's see. Let me just check my notes real quick. Yeah, I think that's all I want to do there. So I'm just going to move into some styling and some responsive, which is part of styling. So for that, on this this test version that I used, one big thing you can see is the font's different. So I'll set that up in a second. But another thing is all I really did was add some space to the top of it, but it makes a big difference, like in how finished it looks. And I don't really care too much to put like an enormous amount of design into this project. So really that's the main thing I want to do to get that header section looking good. And then the rest is kind of just some typography and like a little bit of spacing on these cards. So I'll go to, basically I want to add space on top of the page. I could do that in a million different ways. I'm going to go to this div logo and just do an inline style. I'll go to all props to show that off. I'll do a margin top on here. So I think that's under spacing, margin, and I have the top right here. And I could just say sorry, it froze on me. For rem. And it added that space, and I can see it here. So it just looks a little nicer. So that's one style thing. And then to do kind of like a more wholesale style change, I'll change the typography size and the font. And the way I do that is I set that up on the body class, like the base style class of the page, and let it trickle down to everything else. So for example, this is a header element, or this is a text paragraph element, and it's got text paragraph class, which does not set a size, does not set a font. In this case, I actually did set a size. I did this weather sentence, which I want to be a specific 2M. But like over here, these are the same thing. They're just text paragraphs. Nothing else is specified. So if I make a change at the page body level, it's going to affect everything. So that's what I'll do. And the first thing I'm going to do, so to get to the page body style, before I make this first change, if you're on a page and you're viewing these elements, there's these page properties up here. You get similar tabs that you have in an element. So I can go from properties, which is, by the way, where you set like the title of the page and stuff. But I can go over to styling. And by default, you get a page body class. So I'm just going to use the default one. And that way, every new page I drop on is going to have this default class. So it comes with a few things that are very light, but it kind of resets some stuff and sets the font to Arial by default. I'll change that font in just 1 second, but first I'm going to add a property of font size. So basically what I'm doing is I'm setting the base default font size to 14 pixels. The reason that I'm doing that is because if I shrink the screen and I use responsive design, I can take this base font size and change it to 12 at a tablet size and 10 at a phone. I mean, I don't know if I do those exactly, but I could do something like that and shrink the size as it goes down. And everything else on the page is going to scale proportionally. Whoops. So like this weather sentence was set to a font size of 2M, which is something like 200%. So when I change the base font size from 14 to 12, this will still get smaller because it'll be 2 times 12 instead of 2 times 14. You get the idea. So it's like I'm doing that base level stuff on the page body class strategically. But the next thing I want to do is change the font. And so to add fonts, if you're looking at a font menu, you can click add font here, or you can also go into the design library here from a menu and then fonts. And the way that fonts work in Bildr is you can upload a font or you can link to a font on the web. And so Google Fonts is a popular free way to get fonts, or if you pay for Adobe Creative Suite, you have access to Adobe Fonts. Both of those you can import into Bildr with just a link. And the way you do that, so this right here is the Google Fonts page. I just randomly found this before the demo. So this is a font called Nunito. But you search through, and when you click on a font, it takes you to a page like this. And what you do if you're not familiar with Google Fonts is you go down here and you can select all the different versions, like the different styles you want of the font. Because you're importing them into your website, you don't want to select them all because it'll be more to download, more to import. So you just want to select the ones you need, basically. But as a general rule, regular, which is 400, and bold, which is 700, that's most of the time what you need. So I came in here and I did select this style on regular 400, italic 400, selected those, and then regular 700, bold, and then bold italic. And I just selected those. So those are listed here. That's what it's going to pull in. And it gives me this value. So this value, if I copied this whole thing in our coding, I would put this whole thing in the header, in the head tag of my HTML page. But in Bildr's case, we only need the link to the font, to the CSS. So this href equals is the link. Or if you are clicked on this import, it's the same exact link here. So you copy this link, and then in Bildr, when you add new font, you paste the font URL here. And so in this case, I want Nunito, and I need to paste that link, and then I need to tell it the correct font family, which is listed in Google Fonts. If you come from Adobe, this is all slightly different, but you can find all the same information. But it tells you here how to use the CSS, font family, Nunito, and sans serif. So if I copy this, that's what I can use as the font family. And then the fallback font family was sans serif. I could set that to anything. I could set that to Arial if I wanted to fall back to Arial specifically. And then I just write the name up here. And that's all I have to do to add that font to my project. If I create it, if you remember what the font looked like, it's showing it right here. And I can use it in all the font menus now. I have Nunito in my project. If you wanted to use a second custom font, just to note, in Google, so I'm on Nunito here, I select some of these. If I go to a different font and select a few, it'll add them to this same single link, multiple fonts on one link. So just to note, in Bildr, if you're going to do multiple fonts, you use that same link, but you do it twice. You know, you go add new font twice, and the first time you use the link, but you type Nunito, and the second time you use that same link, but you type the other font name. That's how that would work. So anyway, this font is in my project now. So if I'm back to this page body class and I'm in the font family dropdown, I might have to click out of here and refresh it actually. If I'm in this font family dropdown, I see Nunito. And now if I select this, it updates everything on the page. So this all updated. And it normally updates everything live. You can see it just remove the font live. That's because the one thing it can't do live is insert that page header for the font. So I refresh once to get the page header, and now it'll keep updating live. So that looks nice. So the next thing we'll tackle is I'm going to clean up these cards really quickly, a couple small things, and then we'll do responsive. So if you notice, this test run version I have just slightly cleans these up, which really, if I'm looking at it now, because I don't remember exactly what I did, it looks like it's only a little bit less space in here and a little bit more space in the row, you know, between these two rows. if I look here, it's pretty much what it looks like. So what I would do, now that's all done on this condition card, which if you remember gets used in this grid list of pages element, it gets repeated. But I go to this condition card and do all the styling one time. So to change the spacing between these two elements, they're actually coming from default HTML behavior. So this condition name is an H3, and this comparison sentence is a P tag. And they don't have anything on them. There's no styles on them except what I add. So I know that by default, the H3 has a margin bottom, has a margin top and bottom, and I know that the P tag has a margin top and bottom. So I know that the space between these two things is being caused by a margin. That's what I'm getting at. So I can just update it. So I can go to this header, condition name heading, and I know that I'm only going to do this in one spot. So I just go to the inline property, inline style, and I go margin bottom 0. And then I go to this text paragraph here for the next one. Same thing. It's only going to happen here. So I go to the inline style. I go margin top 0. And that might actually be too close together. Maybe I'll do a margin top of like 0.5. Oops. I'm going to do one other thing I just noticed too. I mean, that actually looks pretty good, I think, when I have space between the rows. So I'll keep it like this. And then before I do that, I'm going to add one thing really quick, which I noticed, which is when I loaded this page, I have to then go click into this input. But the only thing like you can do when you load this page is do that input. So really, for a better UI, when this page loads, I'm just going to do a quick action, focus, set element focus, and choose that input search type of location. And I don't have to care about the focus type. If it was, if there was text in there, I could choose if it's going to focus the beginning or end of the value or select the value. I can just leave that blank. But I do, when the page loads, want to focus that input. And very minor, but that means when I hit refresh the page and don't touch anything, you can see I'm already ready to go in that input, and I can just type my generic Texas search and go. All right, so back to these. I'm going to add a little bit of space between these rows, and then I'm going to be doing the responsive. So these rows are set up actually on the grid element. I had originally, I guess last live stream, used this grid element and created a primary style class called grid cards conditions. And in that class, I made the display grid. So I'm using CSS grid, and I set the columns to 3 columns, 1 fractional width, 1 fractional width, 1 fractional width. That's what those FR mean. That basically just means 3 columns in CSS grid speak, which you can find, that's again, like outside of Bildr, you can find that in any like CSS, you just Google it. And then I also have a column gap in between each column. There's a 1em gap, like 1 em height of the font is what em means, remember? So it's kind of like saying like, if the font's 14 pixels, 1em is more or less saying 14 pixels. And then the row gap has 1em too. I'm gonna actually change this one to be like, let's see, maybe like 3em. I think that looks a little nicer. And one of the reasons I know that it's going to need to change too, I don't remember what I said to in that one, but one of the reasons I know is because when you do responsive, it gets more apparent. Like, oh, I can't even show it, but at this size, if I had no space in here, it would look crazy. But that looks pretty good. Let me check what I had that one set to. Rem. So yeah, 3em is good. Rem and em are similar. Rem is relative to the base body like size, like font size, and em is relative to the parent font size. So all right, so did that. So yeah, so now let's do responsive. And right now, if I were to inspect, this is the way that you test, or the way that I test responsive, the way I'd recommend you test it if you don't know how, is you right click and inspect element, or however you get to the inspector in your browser. And when you inspect, there's a way, normally you're viewing it like this, but you see the stuff on the right side. you can click these devices here, toggle device toolbar, and that'll show you not just a different screen width where you can adjust the screen width really easily, but it also listens to the mobile headers, and it looks, this is a more accurate version of what it would look like on a phone. So rather than just shrinking the browser window, which is what I used to do, at some point they changed it, so shrinking the browser window performs a little differently now. But anyway, so to test responsive, you inspect, you hit this device toolbar, and now I can see the size up here. Like as I scroll, I can see that change. So that helps me with my media queries. But also if I wanted to, I can set different things. Like if I want to set iPhone X size, it's going to set that for me. And this is a perfect segue because as you can see, I'm not handling any responsive yet, and these columns stack, or these columns don't stack. They're 3 across, and it looks weird. And if I were to have anything else, like a smaller, wait, it's frozen a little. Hang on. There you go. Like a smaller resolution phone or something where it's smaller, like it looks even crazier. So a couple things I can see I need to do is I need to change this input. What I would do in this case is actually keep it side by side, and then when it gets too small, when it gets to 335 or less, basically, make this input, finish this input off here, and make the search bar full width, something like that. But that's what I have on the other one. I can actually just show it probably. Something like that. And then I would just stack these columns. And so what I would do, and what I will do in a second, is I'll have it 3 across. When it gets a little bit smaller, they'll go 2 across. It might be like an iPad size. And then when they go really small, we stack them with just 1 phone size. So to do that, we'll start with these cards. To do that, I can come back to where I just was with this grid template columns. So right now I have 3 columns. By default, I'm only touching the default. If I did just 2 of these FRs, that's how I do 2 columns. You can see in the preview over here. So what I want to do is I want to keep the default at 3 columns, but I want to say when it gets to about a tablet size, so I'm in my device media queries, my device list here. I want to say at around tablet size, I want it to go down to just 2 FR. And so if I change that under tablet, now I get this tablet icon. And the way this works is you select the device size you want to apply a style to, and then you make a change to an existing style. So you add a style in all first, then you go to the device you want and make the change at that size, and that will affect that size and anything smaller. So when I say that in tablet view, I want it to go to 2 columns, so I just said here, that'll affect tablet view, landscape, phone, and portrait phone. Everything's smaller than the tablet view. So I can do that. That'll do the 2 column. And then I'll go even further. I'll say when it gets to a little bit smaller, to a landscape phone view, we'll go down to 1 column. And that 1 column will work on the phone too. And it's not specified here. Like if you look at it, it looks like it's 3, but notice there's no phone icon here. So that really just means it's listening to its default, whatever it should listen to, which is going to be the next highest one. So all is 3 columns. Tablet is 2 columns. Landscape goes down to 1. And again, the way I did those columns is CSS grid. That's not Bildr, that's CSS, but that's like a really efficient way to do columns. In this case, it's really perfect for what I need to, because it's not like a masonry style grid. It's like an actual grid. It's perfect for CSS grid. So if I look at this now, hopefully, I'm not sure if this will update live or not, but let's find out. Yep, updated live, cool. So I've got 2 columns at that width. If I go even shorter, ooh, never went down to 1. Let me refresh and make sure. And then I'll go look at it. So 2 columns, yeah, it never goes to 1. I don't know why. That might even be a bug. Let me check this if I just put it there. I don't know. That is how you do it. I just did it in my dry run. So refreshing shows that it's one column. So 3 columns, 2 columns, oops, 2 columns, 1 column. So it does work. I'm not sure why I had to set that or why it was delayed. Like really, I shouldn't have to set this one, but it's not a big deal if I do also. So that's good there. And then let's do the responsive on, the responsive on this input now, which is a little bit trickier. So I did the CSS grid. This actually could be tricky. Like depending on how you set up this grid, you can make that a lot harder for yourself. That CSS grid method, which is very appropriate in this situation, is very easy. So it's not always that easy, but that was an example of pretty straightforward. I'm just changing one property. This is going to be a little different now. This is going to be a couple properties, and I happen to know that this search has some inline styles that I'm going to need to swap out to be a class so I can change them with the media queries. So let's dive in. The first thing I'll do is look at it. So I can see it looks broken here. When it's side by side, I had this button with rounded corners where I remove the inside corners, and I have this input with a border where I removed the inside border. So when it gets smaller and it stacks, it still looks like that. This looks crazy now because it has sharp on this side, rounded on this side. This is missing a border. So I know I'm going to need to do a few things to fix that. But also, I could leave it like this once it's rounded, a small search bar. But I think on a mobile phone, it actually makes more sense just to make this search be a big button that's the same width as the input. And it'll look nice too. So what I'll do is I'll just adjust. So first what I'll do is I'll look at what size I need that at. So if I come in here and I watch this number, you can see that, right? Yeah, you can see the number. So I watch this number. It breaks at around 340 or 335. So I know that that's the general breakpoint I want. So I come into this section here, and I've got my input here and my button here. And so like if I come to this, let's see how I should do this. So I'll just do this right from the beginning. So before I actually do that media query, let me put a class on here that I'm going to use the media query on. So basically the gist of what I'm about to do is you can use these media queries where you change the styles at different screen widths. You can use those. I mean, you have to use those for responsive. That's how you do it. But you can't do a media query on an inline style. So these styles here, edit inline properties, I can't actually do a media query on those because they're hard coded onto the element. So in order to make these properties change with the screen width, first I'm going to convert them to a class. So in this case, I don't want to add these to the main button class because the main button class will apply to any button anywhere else if there were any. I don't think there are any anymore or yet. So I want to actually make a new class, and it's just for this search button. So it's a utility class because it's extending upon that primary button class, but it's just in this one case because it does things when it's the search button. So I'll add a utility class here, a new one, and I would call it, since it's like an extension of button, I would call it like button search or something like that. Now, if I were going to use this setup more, I might call it like button side by side or something that's not search, but it's really the search button, so that's what I'm calling it. So that's step one, is getting the class. Now I need to move these styles into that class so that I can change them on the media query. So in order to do that, the fastest way is I come into the raw CSS here, and I can just cut those, Apple X, save the CSS. So those properties are gone now. You can see it's all rounded. But then I come back to this class I created. I come into the raw CSS again, and I just paste and then save CSS. So now those are back. And now what I want to do, the first step I want to do is I want to say at some media query, I want to remove these 0 pixel border bottom left radius, border top left radiuses. And I want to do that at something, I think I said it was 335 where it broke. So I need to fix them when it's above 335, when the screen width is greater than 335. So if I just look through these media queries, this one is 320, it's too small. This one is 480, that's good. So at 480 pixels, I'm going to start to change the way that the search inputs look and the search button looks, and anything smaller. So I start in here, and I know originally I set the border radius to like, actually I don't know because I'm not sure. I think it was 4 pixels. So I could here type 4 pixels to reset this border radius. But I can also do something a little trickier. Well, not trickier, but just a little less commonly known CSS. Is I can type inherit in there, and that will inherit whatever the border bottom left radius should have been. So because this button class sets it to 4 pixels, inherit will set it back to 4 pixels. And what's cool about using inherit instead of explicitly setting it to 4 in here is if in the future I change that to 6 pixels, I don't have to come change it in here again. So this should do that. This should do the trick to remove the border radius. I'll come back to all and double check. Yep, it's still set to 0. If it's not, if it's bigger than this phone. But that will only do one step. You know, that won't, actually, it's not even working. Maybe I do have to explicitly set it, because maybe inherit is inheriting it from its parent. So let me see. Yeah, sorry. After all that, I do have to explicitly set it to 4 pixels. Inherit is something you can use like across the board on many properties. I'll actually use it in a second. So it's probably still valuable info, but I'm surprised that didn't work. Although CSS, that's how CSS is. So setting it explicitly, now I'll just have to change it in 2 places if I do ever change that. But I got the round in there. Next, I want to make it full width because I think that'll look a little nicer for mobile. So I want to set it so that at this 480 size, I pull it out and make the width 100%. The way I need to do that though, if I'm in this landscape mobile phone media query, this device size here, notice I can't add a new property. It's not available to me. And the reason is you have to add all new properties in the all view. So I want to change the width at a certain size. I'll add width into this main view, and I have to give it a value. So that's where inherit comes in use again. I said I was going to do it in a second. I'll just set the width to inherit. That's almost like setting nothing. That's like the functionality wise, that's basically what's already happening, is width is inheriting whatever it's going to inherit. So I only set that here so that I can change it here. So now I see width's in here. And so in this case, I'm going to have the width come in at 100%. So if I look here, you can see that width is already 100%. So that's step 2. And a lot of times you'd be done here, but I happen to know that I'll run into one more issue that we can fix quickly. So if I keep pulling this out, I get to a size around here where the button is bigger than the input, and that looks weird. And the reason it's happening is because the input is 100% width, but it has a max width on it of 250 pixels. So this input here, and that's just something I wrote in the class. So you can see width 100%, and you can see max width 250 pixels. And so that means that this size, this is getting limited. This is having its max width kick in, but the button is not. So I can fix that by adding a max width to this button at this breakpoint size. But because the button's never going to be wider than that, like I'm setting it wider only at this breakpoint, but it's never otherwise going to be wider. I actually don't need to use a breakpoint or use a media query. I just come into the default property of this button, and I just say in general, the max width should always be 250 pixels, right? Because that'll never affect it normally. It just says the word search, shrinks down to that size. It'll never be bigger than 250, except in this one situation, like here, where it used to be a little wider, now it's 250. And as it shrinks, it stays 100%. So that's looking pretty good there for that component, but we still need to tackle this border on the input. And it's largely the same as what we just did, because I have an input here. I have an input field class. I don't want to do the media query on that class for the border because that would affect all inputs. This is a specific thing. But the way I did that border, remove that border, was in an inline property. So I'll need to add a utility class. In this case, like, and I just extend this exactly. So I type this same name I see over here, but for the search. You can name that obviously however you want. That's up to you. And I'll do the same thing. I'll come into the CSS, cut this out of here, save it, and then open this CSS, paste it in there and save it. And so now by default, I mean, nothing changed. All I did was move that into a class. So by default, that border's gone, but I can come into the landscape view and reset that border right to be, I wonder if I can do inherit on this one. Inherit. I don't know. Whoops. I don't know if this will work. Let me just try this out. Ah, it does work. So what I did was oh, maybe that's why it worked. So border right is set to 0 pixels and none for the type of line, and there's no color filled in. That removes that border right. In CSS, you can actually just write none. And then at this size, I make the border 1 pixel, and I say inherit, which is probably just setting it to solid. And color is probably, we'll see if this works. Probably inheriting the color.
Sorry,
whoa.
I'm having trouble hearing
sorry.
you.
I was right next to my ear. My watch Siri just went off. So that didn't work because I probably need to say solid and set the color. Yeah. So here it's missing, it's gone, but you can't really see it anyway. And then here it just has the border back and it looks good. So that was a little bit of filling around, but basically I just added that border property back in, which I could have gone, I knew what it was. Oh, I did the color wrong. So I could have gone to here, which is where it originally sets that border on the input field class. It's 1 pixel solid and the color is DDDDD. So I actually did it slightly wrong. So I want to come into here and say 1 pixel solid DDD. I couldn't even tell anyway, but that's that. All right, so that looks pretty good. This looks pretty good. This looks good. So I think we're good there. As far as responsive goes, I don't need to do too much more. Now, if I had like a more complicated design, if I had, who knows what, like boxes around stuff and shadows and little things, like I may need to do more tweaking. Normally, if I were doing a full-fledged site, for example, there's more responsive to be done for sure. But for this, that's pretty much all I need. And I don't want to do too much more. You know, I'm keeping it pretty simple. So maybe what I can do now is move into the next phase. The last thing that I'll need to do before this is ready to go live is that I have something in here to like upsell. So I wouldn't keep it just like this maybe, but I'll put something in here to download the app on either of the stores and just kind of show a screenshot of it. And so in the demo I have, the test run, what I do is I put that image in, but it's hidden. And it's kind of like in a weird, I did it in a weird way here, so I did it fast. I shouldn't have this scroll bar, but there's nothing there because I want you to really focus on figuring out what you're going to get, what the value is first. But as soon as you search, as soon as it returns the results, this graphic pops in. Such weird things happening. So yeah, so let me just add this graphic in and then just add that condition to hide it at first and then make it show when you search. And then I think, you know, maybe I would want to do some kind of like contact me on here or some kind of link back to the marketing site. But other than that, this is done and this is ready to go live. And I thought maybe I'd publish it today on the live stream. I could probably even do that. I don't know. You know what I'll maybe do is walk through the initial publishing, but I don't think I'll actually go into my DNS and all that. I don't have that prepared. I don't even remember where I hold this domain. So I'll do that later, but I'll go through the publish. So let me add that graphic in quickly. Show the publish, that'll put us at an hour. And then I'll call it on the stream and call it on the whole yesterday's weather project. And what I'll do is I'll try to get it live as soon as I can so that you can see it in real life working exactly what we just built. You know, I'm not going to do, I might do some more tweaks if I see them, but I probably won't do too much more to it. So on the first day, I had made a section because I knew there was going to be this upsell. So I made a section upsell in here. And I gave it, wait, did I put this in here already? I don't even remember doing this, but apparently I built this already. Oh, I'm in the dry run, sorry. That's funny. So in my real project I've been building in the live stream, I have this section in here with a centered column and there's nothing in it. And that's just my general setup. Each of these things is a section with a centered column. So I can start popping these images in initially by just adding an image. And I'll add some divs around this, but for now I'm just going to add 3 images. And I'm just duplicating these. So these come in as these default images, but I'll go in and just replace these. So it defaults to a data URI image type, which is basically an image in code. That's what an image looks like in code or in base 64. So I change this to media library and select. And this is like where I upload the logo. So I see that in here. If I were using the logo, I could just click it here, but I'm using other stuff. So I go, I want to do App Store graphic. And then the next one, I want to do Google Store graphic. And then the last one is this kind of like promotional graphic I made that's the one thing I was thinking when I said there's tweaks. I might actually change this graphic. But that's that. So they're just on the page and enormous. So let's kind of wrangle them in. The first thing I'll do, actually the first thing I'll do is give these names so that I know what they are. And then I can come in here and just do like some quick styling. Like for this one, I'm just going to see what this looks like at a max width of 200. And then at this one, there's this really quirky thing I know of where one of these images has a border. Like you can see the space around it. It's in the image and the other one doesn't. So it's like stupid to match them in size. That's okay. That's close enough for now. And then I want to put them side by side and center them like I have. Can I show you? I don't know. My computer's freezing up. You can give it a second. I can't click anything else anyway. Okay. So yeah, like I have centered here. Yeah, I can see they're even slightly different sizes. I'll clean that up probably before it goes live. But for me, the way I would do something like that is I would add a container around these 2 images. So I just dropped a div and I put one image in the div and then the other image in the div. And I would just do an inline style on this div. Now you'd have to do this if this is going to change with responsive. Like if I wanted these to stack at mobile, I wouldn't do this inline. I'd do it in a class. But I think these might be fine. So for now, at least, I'm going to do it inline. And I'm just going to say display, whoops, flex, as in flexbox. And then give it these 2 flexbox properties, justify content and align items. So that's CSS again. That's not Bildr, that's CSS. But when something is display flex, which is when it's flexbox, you justify content is the horizontal alignment / spacing, and align items is the vertical alignment / spacing. And these are very confusing properties, not just because of the names, but also because of the values. So a nice thing about Bildr is you don't have to know the values. You can come in here and just select what you need. But basically for this one, I can look at this icon. I can know I need center. And then here I need center, vertically centered. So that's what I'll do to that. You can see already that centers them. And then this graphic, keeping it full width, is what I did here. Now it looks a little pixelated, so it's probably not correct. But that might be pretty good there. The one thing I can do is give it a max width so it doesn't look insane, which I'll do on the inline again. And the reason I'm doing this inline is because it's these one-off styles. They're not things that are reusable that I need to reuse. So it's faster just to do this. And so let's say, I think the whole centered column is a 1200 width, although it might be 900. And then, so this maybe, let's try 600 as a max width. And now this, I can see here, it's not centered. One way I could center an image is to put a text-align center on its parent class. Another way, which is the way I'll center this image, is to make it display block and give it margin left and right of auto. So right now, this image by default is display inline block, which won't listen to that margin left and right. So the first thing I do is set it to display block. And then I just say margin left, auto, margin right, auto. Again, CSS. And this one in particular is a really handy trick. Basically, I mean, it's not a trick, but it's a really handy like tool. So anytime you need to center a block level thing and you don't want to make its parent text line center, text line center also doesn't work to center block level things. So it's a whole other story, but you can do this all the time. You can say display block. If you hover over here, it says block, margin left auto, margin right auto. So now it's centered. So let's take a look at it. Pretty good. I'll just give it a little space. Actually, what I'll do is I'll give this div I used to center these two, I'll give that some space on top and I'll give it some space on bottom. So I come here to this div. Now at this point, I feel like I should mention that my project, like as I'm viewing these things, it sort of looks a little crazy. Like if you were working with a team on a big project, you would not want it to look like this, where it's got all these inline styles here and it doesn't have classes for stuff. Normally in like a well-maintained larger project, almost everything has a class and like a base class and then a utility class. You need to organize a little better. This is a very small project and almost none of this stuff's getting repeated. That's why a lot of this is just out here on the inline styling. And I felt like when I just saw it, I felt like I should mention that because you don't always do that. But personally, I do that maybe more than the average programmer. It's just easier. All right, so I think that's probably good. We refresh the page. Oh, I forgot to hide that. Actually, maybe I will just keep that up, keep that visible from the get-go. It doesn't detract too much. So keep that there. Search, press enter to search. It focused when I loaded. Looks like it's taken a minute, but finds the weather. Sentence is nice. These all look nice. And lastly, stacks a little bit, stacks fully. And then, yeah, like I would probably want to stack these buttons or change them. Really what I should do is something better. When you're on mobile, these buttons are very important, I feel like, because that's where you would actually click them. If you click on a computer, you would just be copying the link for your mobile. So maybe I'll do something a little better in the response there. But for the most part, that's good. And I think I'll just keep it visible from the beginning instead of hiding it at first. Just because. Maybe I'll change my mind. But for now, I'll keep it like that. And yeah, I think I'll just show some publishing and then call it for this project. For this, if you did want to hide this graphic and then show it, you can just hide it in the beginning with styles. So I could either in these inline styles say display none. Well, I'll do it actually on this whole upsell div. I could either say display none here, or I could add a class, like a utility class, section upsell and hide it somehow there, whether it's display none or whether it's transform scale 0 or whether it's max height 0, overflow hidden. Many ways to hide something. And then in this action where it does the get weather data, so when you click search, it runs get weather data. And I know that because on here, events, click get weather data. I just have to add into here, this, remember, it would start hidden in whatever method we used. In here, I would just reverse that method. I would just say display block in the style or remove that class that's hiding it or whatever, and it would hide that or it would show that graphic. But I'm not going to do that now because I kind of like it shown. So I think the last thing I'll do is go through some of the steps to publish this and just talk about what it means to publish in Bildr. So to start as a baseline, what I have is a live view and a development deployment. That's what we've been working in. So Bildr comes by default with 3 deployments: development, test, and production. And this mirrors a much more professional workflow than most no-code tools get into. Although I've been seeing it more and more, and I think behind the scenes some of them do it, but this is like, from my perspective as a builder, I need to understand that when I'm building, I'm in the development deployment. If I want to push to a test deployment, that means I can publish to test, and it'll be a different URL, but a stable environment where people could test. So if I'm working with a team or if I have a client, I can publish to that test URL that only they know. And then while I'm building in this development environment and possibly breaking things, their test environment still works. So that's the benefit there. And then when everything's good in the test environment, you publish that out to the production environment. So it's a really cool way to be able to work fluidly in the studio, test with this live view, and always see this up-to-date development deployment, but not affect your live version and not affect your test version. So all that's just explanation. What it looks like in practice is when you're done building and you're ready to publish to either deployment, you come up to this publish. You hit publish, and if you're not on a paid plan, you need to pay before you publish. So there's 2 tiers in this beta version right now. It's $9 for essentially 2 projects, or $29 for unlimited projects monthly. And there's a few other differences in that price, but you're going to need to be on one of the plans in order to publish. So I hit publish, and it's going to say, what source do I want to publish from? That's the first step. So you're always in development. Like 99% of the time, you're publishing from development into something. So I go development, and I'm going to skip test for this. This is a very simple app. I don't have anyone working with me. I don't need a test deployment at all. So I can just ignore this. I would just publish right from development into production. At this stage, because I haven't published this project yet, it's asking me if I want to use a Bildr subdomain or a custom domain. For this web app specifically, it's gonna be at app.yesterdaysweather.com. So I would choose custom domain here and go through a few steps to add the custom domain to the project. Once I do, so this would be like this, app.yesterdaysweather.com. And I don't need this. It defaults you to being like a blank and a www, because most root domains, you want www to work and you want nothing in there to work. It's not what I'm doing in this case. I'm just using a subdomain. So I actually remove that www. I just have app.yesterdaysweather.com. I verify it here so that it's basically just Bildr is like saying, yeah, no one else has this domain in our system, and it's a correct domain. And then I'll click continue, and it's going to actually tell me here what to change on my domain name account in my DNS records. So technically, this is kind of like an advanced topic, DNS. It's super confusing, and if you haven't ever pointed a domain, it's intimidating. But actually, aside from finding these values in your domain registrar, it's really not that hard. You just have to copy and paste. So you add a TXT record with this for this. You add a CNAME record of app with this value. Like, that's how you set it up. And if I had done a root domain, if I had just done yesterdaysweather.com, I would have an A record in here too. But basically, you need to know a little bit in order to change these. And once you do it once, you'll be a little scared, you'll be a little confused. But once it goes through and you realize, you're like, oh, it's pretty simple. I'm not going to do it now, though. The hour is up. Normally, I would add these. It takes a little bit to propagate, but then I would check this box and click continue. Bildr would find them. Bildr would set everything up in its system, and then Bildr would ask me a few questions for my SSL certificate so that it can be HTTPS, which everything in Bildr is. And then I'd be good. I'd click publish and I'd be live at app.yesterdaysweather. And it's that simple. And then in the future, every time I go to publish to production now, I don't need to go through all this step of changing the domain. That's all already going to be done. So I just say publish from development to production, go, and it publishes. And then just to show you a slightly easier method, well, it won't let me go back now actually, would have been this Bildr subdomain where you're essentially typing a word. So I could type yesterday's weather and then it'd be yesterdaysweather.bildr.com and just publish. That's a lot faster. You don't have to change anything, obviously, because Bildr handles that domain. So yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for following along, and hopefully I touched on enough cool things in Bildr that it's useful for your project too. On Friday, I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do, I'm talking with the rest of the team and being a little strategic in what we do this Friday, but I think I'm going to do a Bildr demo. And if not, maybe I'll do a Bildr like style sheet that I'll share as a pattern. But either way, it's going to be Bildr based, and it's going to be for the new users coming in or just getting in and just getting their feet wet. So I'm going to try to keep it general and show as many different aspects as I can. So I'll announce it more. And then I still didn't finish the website for these live streams, but I did. I mean, I have a progress made on it. It's just I'm doing it on the side basically. So live.workandwhistle.co will be the website. It's going to have the no code list videos, which there's 20 of those. It's going to have these videos, which this is the third of 3. So there'll be 3 of these. And then all videos in the future, and I'll announce what I'm going to stream in the future on there. So it'll be a place to go for all this. So that is not live now, but will be live.workandwhistle.co. Thanks for watching again, and see you next time on Friday, 1 p.m. Austin time, which I think is 7 p.m. London time and Greenwich Mean Time. All right, thanks.